Hey, my holy friends, seventh grade. Unfortunately, I'm not here today, um, which is sad, I know. But you're going to have a chance to have a personal chavruta with me as we go over your packets. We were going to do this together as a class, but this way we can individualize it a little bit better and just go over your answers to make sure they're correct. And the benefit to you is I'm going to then allow you to hand this in after going through my corrections and you can earn full credit for it. So any correction you make, even if you made a mistake the first time, you should make that correction now. You're going to hand this in at the end of the class, and you will get a grade based on hopefully answering all these questions correctly on our very first Mishna. With this, we are concluding unit number 1. Tomorrow we'll move into the Gemara and unit number 2. So if you can open up your Gemara page, we're going to actually jump over the page of labeling the Gemara. I'm going to assume that everybody did that correctly. I'll still check. But I'd like you to go to page number 2, which should say Intro to Mishna and Gemara. If you don't already have it, in front of you, you should have your packet in front of you and a writing utensil so you can make these corrections, or you can write things in as we go along. Let's start. The first question was, what did Moshe receive at Har Sinai? So only one of these were actually focused on in the video, but one I was expecting that you knew. So for A, you should have wrote Torah Shebichtav. Torah Shebichtav. You want me to write it? Again, I'm writing in English. You could have written it in Hebrew. Torah Shebichtav, which is the written Torah. That is the Chumash, essentially, is answer number 1. The second thing, which the video did very much focus on, was the Torah Shebe'al Peh, or the unwritten Torah, the Torah that was passed down. Oops, sorry, I'm not spelling that correctly. The unwritten Torah. Very good. Those would be our answers for our first 2 questions of the year. Excellent job. Let's move on. What does the Torah Shebe'al Peh mean? What does Torah Shebe'al Peh mean? So I would have accepted a number of answers here, but something along the lines of the oral Torah, or the Torah that was passed down by word, by teacher to student, passing it down from generation to generation. But Torah Shebe'al Peh means the Torah that was taught by heart, Torah that was taught by heart, or you could have wrote the oral Torah, passed down from teacher to students. Something along those lines would have given you full credit. Again, if you have to change your answer a little bit, that is fine. Very good. Move on to question number 3. We are moving very quickly. Again, feel free to pause the video at any time to make sure you're answering these questions correctly. Number 3, the Torah was passed down from Moshe to the Zikanim, which was the elders, to the Nevi'im, to the prophets. The Nevi'im passed the Torah down to the first group of rabbis known as what? The first group of rabbis after the period of the prophets, this group actually included some prophets, was called the Anshe Knesset HaGedolah, otherwise known as the men of the Great Assembly. The Anshe Knesset HaGedolah, and that is your answer to question number 3. Very good. Moving on to question number 4. This group then passed the Torah onto pairs of leading scholars in each generation known as what? So you got this group of this Anshe Knesset Gedolah. It actually was made up of 120 scholars and actually some prophets too. They then passed the Torah down to basically 2 leaders of every generation, right? You had a pair of leading scholars in each generation who would then pass it down to the next pair of the top leaders of that generation. Each pair was called the Zugot. Zugot means the pairs. Question number 4, the answer was Zugot. Very good. Moving on. Now here's where we got a little fun. Put the questions with small boxes. Question number 5. Over the next 250 years, how many Zugot were there that led the Jewish people? Also, who were the last of the Zugot? Okay, how many Zugot were there? I believe the answer to that was 40, I believe. And who were the last of the Zugot? Was Hillel and Shammai. the famed leaders, which eventually became Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai. Okay, Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai, who, as we know, have many machlokot, many arguments in the Gemara, as those two houses ended up, and those two academies had very different teachings on different aspects of Jewish law. Very good. Let's keep going. Who decided to write down the Torah Shebe'al Peh for the first time, and why did he decide to do so? So this is a very important question also. Now, remember, from the time that Moshe received the Torah Shebichtav, the written Torah, and the Torah Shebe'al Peh, Moshe was not allowed, and no generation, no leader was allowed to write down the Torah Shebe'al Peh. That was only passed down from Rebbe to Talmid, Rebbe to student, and on and on and on for generations. Eventually, it is written down. Who is it written down by? His name was Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. Rabbi Yehuda the Prince, who was the leader of the Jewish people at that time. He lived in Eretz Yisrael, and he was very wealthy and a tremendous Talmid Chacham. Now, why did he decide to do so? If you didn't write this down, please get, there were really two reasons that I wanted you to focus on, but try to get at least one of these reasons down. Number one was people's memories weren't as good anymore. People's memories weren't as good anymore, and if it wasn't written down, the Torah Shebe'al Peh would be forgotten. That's a very good reason. Number two was that there was actually religious persecution going on. Religious persecution, which made it harder to learn. And therefore, they needed to write it down. People were being killed for studying Torah, and therefore less people were studying or weren't studying with the same degree and the same flexibility and freedom as before. Made it harder to learn. They needed to write it down. Very good. That's question number 6. You move on to question number 7. What was this great work called that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi wrote down? So people got confused by this question. Maybe it wasn't phrased exactly perfectly, but what was this great work down? The answer I was looking for was the Mishna, is what we were looking for. This is called the Mishna, and what you learned with me when you were in station number 3 was one of those Mishnayot that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi wrote down. How many years ago was that? Question 8 was not on the video, so I did not expect you to know this. You could have guessed. Approximately what year was it completed? Rabbi Yehuda Nasi wrote this in Eretz Yisrael, in a city called Tzipori. He completed it in approximately 200 CE. CE just means the common era. The years that we count, 200, which means we're now in the year what? 2017. So you're talking about almost over 1,800 years ago, which is incredible. And to me, I get inspired by this. Maybe this is just Rabbi Teller who's being a little funny, but I find it inspiring that when you're learning a Mishnah, when you were studying with me just the other day, you were looking at text that was written down and that has been studied for over 1,800 years. That's just a very powerful thing to think of yourselves as that next link in the chain. All right, keep going. What are Braitot and how are they different than Mishnayot? So I'm not going to write all this down right here. Hopefully you got this down, but a Braita is essentially a teaching that was not recorded by Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi collected teachings into the Mishnah, but teachings that came out at that time, but just were not collected by Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, but were collected by others. Those were called Braitot. Now they were written at the same time period, so they have the same power, so to say, as a Mishnah, but they're not officially in the Mishnah that in the paragraphs, in the sections that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi collected. So that's how a Braita is different than a Mishnah. Please get that down. So with that, we're actually done this first section. Kol hakavod to you. As soon as you feel you have all the answers down to this, click on video link number 2, and you are going to go over the next few pages in your packets. Okay? See you soon.